We are. Hello, everybody. It is Wednesday, and in Toronto, it is the most magnificent day out there. And I am just such a happy camper now because I can do my walking and talking and getting the sunshine, my vitamin D, and everything else. So, good morning, afternoon, or evening to you all. And hello, Nicole. How are you?
I'm great. I'm like you. I like the warm weather. I always have, coming from Arizona, it gets hot, but we've got a beautiful day today. I haven't gotten out there yet, but I can hear the birds and I can see the sun. So that's going to be my thing as soon as we're done is get a little vitamin D on me. And other than that, I'm raring to go for this wonderful Wednesday.
Well, first of all, we would love to just begin our session, but our lovely guest hasn't shown up yet. So, we're just being real. And whatever, I'm not sure what her problem is because I have sent her the link many a times. But in the meantime, we also want to tell everybody that we have a very, very, very happy show. Tomorrow we are putting out a super let's get real session for a very special guest, and we have been trying to get him on here several times, and because of problems of his schedule and so forth, it hasn't happened. But drum roll, tomorrow coming.
Absolutely. Special time, special place, special man.
So the man, David Meltzer, who wrote this book, Connecting to Goodness, is arriving tomorrow. And we're excited about that. And we are going to be putting on a special time for 1:00 in the afternoon tomorrow, in which we'll go over and we will ask. So if anybody is watching this, please, and they want to know anything, they can email us, right to our show here, or you can even to Nicole or I, you can send it to us in private message, and we will be more than happy to ask David once we have him. But before we do that, today we have another guest. And you know what? Just a reminder to everybody, what is Let's Get Real? Let's Get Real is about getting real about life, but it's also, we're here so that we can sort of help you shine and give you ideas. And if you're struggling through life, I want you to just know that you're not the only one. Everybody struggles. That's how life is. And as we struggle, we hopefully that we learn from those struggles. And instead of, like, I always say, I'm getting wiser and stronger as every time that I have to go through a struggle. And that's what it's all about, is what you're going through, at least learn from that. So that I think the universe brings it to us in an easier form the first time, but if you don't get it, it will keep on repeating until you get what your life lesson is. Is that correct, Nicole?
It is correct. And honestly, the way I feel about it, sometimes if you don't get it in this lifetime, it is something that repeats in another one. So pay attention, listen to the whisper. Feel your heart. What is your heart saying? Go with what your soul feels. There's just so many ways to become aware of not just yourself, but what's going on around you and how you can make the world a better place just by being you, just by being aware, and just by lending a hand to others. Because the big lesson that we come here to learn is about love, and to love ourselves along with others. So absolutely, absolutely. And for me, I'm trying to at least really step up my game this time around when I came to realize that, we're here for a reason, brought here for a reason, and so are the other people that we connect with. So with that, I see that our guest has arrived and I'm so excited. So I'm going to give you an introduction here.
Please do.
And I would love to. And I've got her short bio in my hand. And I'm like, my goodness, if this is the short bio, what must her long bio be like? It's very, very impressive. This young lady is, she's an international speaker and author. She is a mindset and leadership facilitator. She's founder of a nonprofit, Victorious, which help empower those with disabilities. Very near and dear to my heart. I have one called Don't Disabilities. So when I saw hers, I really resonated with that. And she is also Miss California Wheelchair USA 2022. So how impressive is that? And I would like to welcome Deborah Vick to our stage.
Hello, Deborah. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, just before we begin, I can tell right now your sound is very low. Can you turn it up so we can let our lovely people hear you? And because I know you have a lot to say, and we want to make sure that everybody hears because your
I'm going to
story.
use my spare microphone. I forgot to make sure my microphone was being charged today.
Okay, we're good. I
Is
can
that
hear
better?
you. Yeah, if you just make sure that you just speak up a little bit so we can just make sure that we hear everything you have to say.
Sounds good.
Perfect. So, how are you doing today?
I am doing wonderful, and it's truly a pleasure to be here with everybody. And of course, here on stage with our connections. I know, all three of us have connected in a number of platforms and have that shared mission of community and that collaboration and really working together to connect and to help others connect so that we can all thrive.
Absolutely. And Glenda, that's just what we were talking about, so she's got that understanding that we're all here to help each other to, thrive, survive, and come alive. So thank you, Deborah. I'm so glad you're here.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
So, Deborah, how did your journey start? Because we see that, you Miss Wheelchair California USA, but we know that it didn't start from that huge admiration. But, tell us about where you started and how you found your way.
So, my journey is a little different than I would say the average person. I've always had very high aspirations from my childhood years. It was actually my dream to run for president in the United States and not expecting to win as a disabled Jewish woman from New York, married to a naturalized citizen. Probably not, right? But to have those conversations of people who want to serve our country, who are not billionaires, but really wanting to connect. And even billionaires can connect, but the concept of anybody being able to be part of our community and serve. I come from a family of servant leaders. My family have always been leaders, but my dad's a retired teacher. My mom's a retired nurse. I'm also daughter of grandparents who were educators as well as veterans. So we've come from a family of giving and of being of service and always finding a way to usually creatively and outside of the box thrive through the most struggling of times. And
That's
with that,
Yeah, and
go ahead.
no, I was going to say that's amazing because you had some really good role models, it sounds like. So that kind of just was easy for you to flow into that path. And we need more people like that. We need so many more people to just step up and do what's right, for our community, for our people, and be inclusive.
Well, and you were saying doing what's right. I mean, one of the things I remember as a kid, my we were sitting at the kitchen table, we're having dinner. My dad got a call. A friend or a peer whose car was stuck and they had a problem. And my dad dropped he was doing and eating to go help the person. And remembered having that conversation, well, why you're doing that right now? And that was the response, is we need to help people when they need it. You never know when you're going to be in need, but not doing it for the purpose of doing it with an expectation that somebody's going to help you down the line. Doing it because it's the right thing to do.
I love it.
that's what I was taught. And again, that role model with, you were talking before about special needs. My grandfather and grandmother had created a program on Long Island to help adults with developmental disabilities and delays get bar and bar mitzvah at a time when that was practically unheard of. And after they did it at one temple, they ended up being asked to do it throughout Long Island at all these different temples because of that moment of the realization that whatever we see on the outside shell isn't what's within the person, and that every one of us needs that opportunity to be loved, to given the opportunity to grow and thrive, and to accept people where they're at without judgment.
That's huge. And that is because I totally relate to you. And even when you're saying you're going back to your grandparents' stage of life, because, I have siblings with special needs, and I'm going back years. My siblings are now 65 and 70. So in the years when they were born, they were, it was not a pretty sight how people reacted to them and things like that. It was a very different world there where we stand now. And it taught me as a child a lot of great lessons, and some pretty sad ones too,
Right.
unfortunately.
Definitely. And I've seen even that transition in my own life.
Yeah.
I started using crutches at age 13. So I'm 48. Obviously that's several decades ago. And seeing the treatment I had when I was on wooden crutches, when I had classmates take out the screws so that I would fall when I would stand, or knocking them out from underneath me, or putting things on the ground, things like that. I ended up getting like metal crutches at one point, and eventually a wheelchair, then a power scooter and a power wheelchair. And seeing that difference in treatment that I had, depending on what stage I was in my journey, has been very eye opening. This past year, I did a lot of self healing and self work on my own self to forgive and grow from those bullying experiences. And this is before I knew Nicole, but I went on my own forgiveness journey, to forgive myself for not being an upstander, or knowing even that terminology of what an upstander was, to forgiving for not being the role model that I could have been and choosing to be now, but also just to grieve, right? To grieve the life that I thought I was supposed to have. Which, I still get verklempt and choked up every once in a while when I talk about that experience, or even that transition and the impact on my kids, because I have two teenage boys, a 17-year-old and going on 40, and no, my youngest just turned 13.
Wow.
So we have all of that as well added into it. But to also realize sometimes people just don't know. I mean, most of my experience is from people not knowing.
And I
People
agree
don't
with
want to
that. I
know.
think that part of the world is of ignorance, because people have never been exposed to it. And, maybe I would have been a very different person today had I not had that in my life as well. So I believe that it is. And for me, same thing. Instead of having anger and hatred out towards others, I would rather sit down and explain something to somebody so they really understand about we all got feelings.
Yep.
um, so do you mind me asking, what is your situation, so that people can understand, and maybe that you can connect with other ones who maybe
Right.
are going through what you have.
Absolutely. And normally I would have given this wonderful pitch that we've been practicing recently in our trade program. Kind of missed that part over there, but
No, we're all
I
good.
am a chronic illness warrior, right? So I have multiple rare diseases and autoimmune conditions, one of which is a connective tissue disorder. Once any connective tissue stretches, it can't retighten. So all of my ligaments and joints sublux and dislocate. And the reason why I went into that explanation is that although Ehlers-Danlos in itself may be rare, a lot of the comorbidities, the sciatica issues, the degenerative diseases, the damage to our bladders, our pelvic floor dysfunction, crosses over into a lot of other invisible illnesses. The arthritis, all of those things are common secondary diseases that we have with Ehlers-Danlos, GI issues, you name it. There's a whole nice laundry list, and I've probably had it or know somebody who does. So that is part of the experience.
Yeah,
I like to say my whole body just kind of does its own little thing. It's a
that's
third party to us at this point.
yeah.
I have another rare disease called myasthenia gravis, and that's in the same family as MS. It's
Mhm.
similar in symptoms to MS and ALS, and it's under muscular dystrophy. Body attacks the receptors from the brains to the muscles. So we have a lot of muscular weakness as well as neurological challenges. So I have a nice combination of those things. And I also have, which some people are now hearing about, is dysautonomia or POTS, and a lot of people with autoimmune conditions, as well as a lot of people with long haul COVID, are being having very challenged by it, and it can be very disabling. And that's actually one of the things my service dog alerts me for is when I'm going to pass out.
Wow.
Well, I hats off to you because I know life in itself can be very difficult to go through, but having all these other knocks down to be able to get up every morning and talking about an empowering person is, none of us can come close to even the challenges that you have had, but to have a get up and have a smile in your face, I commend you for that and I honor you for that.
And she's a lady that no matter what group we're in, what time it is, how many people are there, what you see is what you get with Deborah. Always in a good mood, always uplifting, always pleasant, always funny, always has a wise word. And here she sits, with oxygen. And this, Glenda, I've never heard her complain, ever.
I love it.
I do. And
Yeah, of
I have to
course.
say, I do. I have those moments, but I try to limit them
Hmm.
because it'll pull you down more. One of the things, and Nicole and I have had these conversations of my energy work and my meditation and my singing bowls, my mindfulness practice. It's what helps me. The creative elements I have behind me, those are all things that I do. Actually, everything I've made is behind me because that helps me process. It helps me remain mindful, and it helps me realize there's a bigger picture. I am a person who gets immunoglobulin or IVIG. It's a plasma-based therapy. I get infusions every other week, and people are coming in. And for me to survive, there's over 500 people a year donating their plasma so that I can live, right?
Wow.
And we put things in perspective like that. Or I go and get a medication called Rituxan, and it's a type of chemo for one of my autoimmune conditions. But I'm in a center, an oncology center, right? And there are people there who are fighting cancer at that moment.
Yeah.
So it's all in perspective. My youngest, he was in NICU, but he was only in NICU for a week. And when he was there, you can see these tiny little babies fighting every moment for their life, or these nurses giving every moment of their energy to the parents and the babies, right, to make it possible for us. And it's perspective. When you can see it through that, it's easy to be able to have joy.
Absolutely.
And it's so true. Yeah.
I've
I think
sat in an oncology center with my mother, for many, many months. And you look around and you just know that if you were to come back a year from now, those people that are there are not going to be there. And so I understand what you're saying about perspective. It's very important, to keep that in mind when we're doing something like that. So is your condition, is that something that's hereditary, Deborah? Because I
So
had
the
never,
Ehlers-Danlos is,
uh-huh.
but we kind of quite see it in our family line. Although my mom has a lot of joint challenges, so I don't know if there's any relation to that. Uh, But there's also a stronger genetic connection in my Ashkenazi Jewish descent as well. There seems to be a higher correlation with a number of these conditions. We don't know where myasthenia gravis starts from. That's one of those autoimmune conditions where they don't know where that originates from. And some of the other ones, most we don't know. Even one of the other ones that I have that's rare is RSD, or now known as CRPS. And it's chronic regional pain syndrome. It's extremely painful disorder. And there's known reason what's the line or hereditariness in it, but we do know trauma or injury so can cause it. All my surgeries triggered mine. Not the funnest of things.
Hmm, no
So
kidding.
when you're going through trying times, what is your secret? You talked already about meditation. Do you have a process that you go through to help you? Because, like there's very many times people will come around. Hold on, we have somebody who made a comment here.
Oh,
Oh my gosh,
geez.
sorry, didn't see that.
What an
I'm
ass.
discussing. We all have times when we have gone through some major things in our lives, and there's something that knocks us down, and it's, like you say, it's perspective. It's all relative. What I used to see and what I would see from others. Watching where I would watch my brothers with challenges, and somebody who was able to walk and talk and everything, and when they complained, and it was like I had a hard time sometimes accepting people complaining, when I looked at them and I thought to myself, your brain works, your hands work, your arms work. What are you complaining about?
Right.
So, how do you deal with all of these type of things?
A couple of things. First, my card making. So when I work with my watercolors, for me, I can get really absorbed in my crafts, and it becomes a meditation without it initially intending to be a mindfulness practice. Initially, it was, I grew up doing crafts. I never sat still. I've probably always had symptoms of ADHD from a very small childhood, but it's also what I leaned into. As a child, I remember learning how to knit and needlepoint and all those needlework with my grandmothers, but my
Nice.
hands can't do that anymore, right?
Yeah.
And I adapted it for a while, but again, when my hands got really bad, I could no longer do that. So I found something else. I found art programs on my iPad. And what's wonderful about that, I have adaptive tools to hold my iPad up at a place that doesn't cause more neck damage for me. I am fused from T2 down to C2. I mean, C2 down to T2, but I have problems above and below my fusion as well. And so I can have an adapter to hold my iPad pencil, and I can make beautiful artwork with things that mimic acrylic pours and watercolors and alcohol inks and all these things that I would do with all my initial manipulatives and still enjoy the movement, the readjustment, the process, the blending of the colors, just being present with the changes. That, or I take watercolors everywhere with me. I go to the hospital. I bring my watercolors. I bring cards that I'm going to watercolor, and I usually give it to the nursing staff afterwards. And I go to the ER. I have like little travel kits. So I bring those with me because it's my way of escaping. I can't actually escape my body, but I can through my artwork. And that's such a redirection for me. And it's what helps pull me out. And then the other thing when I'm going down that, rabbit hole is remembering that others are looking to me for seeing me as a thriver. So if I'm not going to pull myself up for my own self, then I got to remember I have to be able to be a good model for the kids I work with. I'm a Boy Scout leader, I'm a mother, I'm a leader in other programs. I need to always remember that somebody's looking to you, whether you realize it or not. People
Totally.
are always looking. And you can choose to help yourself by helping somebody else, by being a good role model for them. And in turn, you become a role model for yourself. So if you keep that in mind, that also helps. And that's actually something that happened for me this past year with the Miss Wheelchair competition. I originally did it for those that come after me, for young women to feel beautiful, braces, no braces, wheelchair, no wheelchair, whatever visible, invisible disabilities it may be, but in that process, I found my own confidence and feeling of self worth and feeling of beauty that I had never had before.
I love that.
And it wasn't like that wasn't my intention. It was my intention to be a good role model, but I found my own voice in that process as well.
Beautiful. Well, isn't it when we help someone else, is, we feel so good, it comes right back to us. It really builds our own heart. So, what's
Absolutely.
the hardest part about helping somebody else? It's kind of selfish because we end up getting the most out of it as well for ourselves. So it's kind of cool.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm curious, Deborah. We did a Sparkles pageant back when I lived in Arizona, and it was for handicapped people, and it really changed the dynamics of their life in terms of finally being seen, being heard, how they felt about themselves. They got to dress up in makeup, pretty gowns, and they became very confident instead of being picked
Absolutely.
on. So did you notice that in your competition? Were you able to meet others and
Absolutely.
oh, good, good, good,
So
good.
I'm still in contact with my pageant sisters. They're amazing women, all in our right. We all grew through the process. And what was unique about the competition is that we supported one another because a big part of this competition is advocacy work
Mhm.
and going out there, being on social media, which I'm still learning how to get comfortable with, to be honest. To be in front of a camera is not something that was always my forte. I've been a photographer since 13, not usually one on the other side of that camera. But we were in the cameras, we were in events. We all had PowerPoint presentations at the competition as well. So, as well as a marketing presentation. So, we learned who we were, we learned who each other were, we were able to support each other's platforms. So, there was a lot of that. And then, yes, there was the 2 nights where we were in formal gowns and we had our hair and makeup done. And on the final night,
Nice.
they actually had a makeup artist come in, star artists doing our hair and makeup. It was a great experience.
Good. And it does open a lot of doors. A crown and a sash will open a door to get your story out. So I kudos to you for doing that and making yourself heard. I'm so proud of
It
you.
it was way beyond my comfort zone. I never thought I'd be in a pageant. I grew up more of a tomboy than, a girl in dresses. So it was way different. In fact, at the time, I remember going into the store going, I'm supposed to dress like a woman of 2022, but I have leggings and t-shirts and Boy Scout shirts in my closet. And that's it. They're
Yeah,
mostly green and black.
it's
So
a,
what am I
it's a
supposed to wear?
You.
it's a transition, that's for sure.
But it
It was
also, when you
but
stepping out of your comfort zone, you actually, just like you saying, you turn around and you see that there's so many people behind you
right.
that you're leading the way to. So, that says a huge amount. And for others who are maybe too scared to step up and do something, and even the fact that you're here now and you're talking in front at Facebook Live now, where there is other people watching and seeing you, and somebody who might be watching this and saying, I don't think I could do that. Well, maybe this was something you said you earlier, you might not have been able to do that, but now, look what's
2 years
happening.
ago, I wouldn't speak in front of a microphone. I lost confidence in my public speaking. I never thought I would gain confidence to speak again. I don't speak the way that I used to speak because of my cognitive and neurological challenges with my disorders. So I like to say I have a squirrel brain. It kind of, lose track in a 2 seconds and I might forget what I was going to say or not be able to communicate what's in my mind's eye. Like I'll have the image, but I can't connect the words from what I'm seeing to my mouth. And it can be extremely infuriatingly and frustrating. So I have the most empathy for everybody who have neurological challenges or have neurodivergent challenges that might make it difficult to communicate or neuromuscular challenges that might make it difficult to communicate or nonverbal. And so I never thought I would speak at public events anymore. And I started to practice speaking again on Clubhouse. My friend Whitney, also an RSD and also a former pageant contestant as well, had invited me into Clubhouse almost 3 years ago. I came on, well, right after, I guess 2 years ago. We came in right after the COVID shutdown, and I started practicing speaking again. And then two of my friends nominated me for the competition. I didn't think I would do it. But then I was like, well, I'll push myself. Let's do it. But I never really thought I was going to get so much out of it or even grow from the experience. And yet, at the final competition, despite having a really bad UTI, just coming back from the ER, my IV machine breaking as well, and a plethora of other challenges,
Wow.
I still gave one of my best speeches.
Yay.
And my brother came from New York. My parents came from Arizona. My cousin, who had no idea what she was getting into, came to be my assistant for pageant week. And my husband drove out the kids. So my family were there supporting me, and my service dog right up on stage with me, stealing all the attention because he's so incredibly cute. And he was so perfect on stage. It was like he was auditioning for something. I just didn't know about. But all that came together, and it's because I was willing to step beyond that comfort zone. And this is a tip that I have for people. If you don't know if you can do it, make a declaration in front of others who are going to hold you accountable, because that's what I did. I made that declaration to my friends. I made that declaration in a couple of spaces in Clubhouse that I had been speaking in, including the Fed Talks room. And after doing that, I knew people were going to have that expectation of performance. So I did it. And I am thrilled I did. I ended up on a news show, being interviewed. I ended up using that as part of a chapter for a collaborative book that I was recently in again. And again, that stepping stone for growth. But it's also, you never know who needs to see you doing something.
Exactly.
So
And,
true.
and yeah, and that's, I give you a lot of credit for, because it's true. The whole thing is we have all this fear or self-doubt because we're always worried. I just did a Facebook Live this morning about it, of the what ifs. We live in the what if thing. What if I fail? What if somebody talks about bad about me? What if they reject me? What if? And it can just scramble the brain. But if you just say, to hell with the what ifs, and I'm going to do it anyways, and I'm going to do it because, you know what? I don't need to be perfect.
Right.
And I'm just going to do it. And if I fumble, I'll learn from it. And that's what it's all about, is let's stop worrying about, are we pretty enough? Are we perfect enough? Like, there is no such thing in life.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And through all of that, Deborah, when did you have time to open your nonprofit foundation, Victorious?
So we did open it approximately 2 years ago, actually 2 years ago in March. And I didn't get to do a lot last year, as I was actually battling for medical care as well as being in the competition. So I didn't get that far last year with it. And we're really starting to kick it into high gear now. I'll be honest, we relocated a year and a half ago. With that relocation, just post one neck surgery, I ended up with trying to transition to doctors, resulted in hospitalization a couple of times with rare bacteria infection, and then I wasn't getting treated properly for my myasthenia gravis, so I ended up in a full exasperation and needing plasma transfusions and all these wonderful things. And then another crisis in this last fall. So it's been a little bit of a journey trying to balance it all, but it's coming together now. And through this process, though, it's also helped us really transition where and how we want to work with people. Initially, it was around the soft skills for helping people gain that soft skills for job opportunities. But now it's really become how I see life with that whole person approach. Helping people find that joy and purpose in life, a purposeful life, but through that balance of the mindfulness of the movement. In most cases, it's some sort of adaptive movement in creative arts, because that's bringing together your mind, your body, your spiritual element, and wherever that may be, whether it's religious or whether it's within nature, of just bringing that whole element of energy together and creating your best life today, right? Not worrying about where tomorrow is, not worrying about what's happened, but at this moment to be present and to really be open to making that most of the experience that we're having right now, because that moment is only here for now and it can never be here again. So every moment we let just fly by us, we're losing out on
Yes,
experiencing the
that's
here and the space and the now.
very well said. Very well said. And do you work with all ages, or is it just adults, or do you work with youth also?
Yeah, I
I
was
work
going to
with
ask,
youth
who's
as
it
well.
open to?
I work with all ages, so I actually have a program for teenagers. I also happen to be a tutor right now for special needs youth, and I'm actually working with kindergartner, sixth grader, seventh grader, and an eighth grader.
Wow.
So I work with all ages, and I actually started working with children in the neurodivergency community about 11 years ago. My first role in scouting was to be a scout leader for a den that had three children that were neurodivergent, three with ADHD, and one with a combination of different challenges. The following year, we had a high functioning child with Down syndrome join our den as well. So I learned how to adapt a lot of what I do with adults for youth. You know, the
Ah,
experience I had from college and the adaptive sports, and bringing that in to working with youth. And that's again coming back to meeting people where they're at. I had a young woman I was working with who needed to move, right? And I didn't judge, and I said to her, as soon as I explained to her, it's okay for you to get up and move. If you need to move, you need to rock, you need to widget, all good. It's all acceptable here. I know that's what you need. And as long as I know you're understanding and we can communicate, all is great. And she just glowed. Just
oh,
absolutely glowed because she didn't have to wear a mask to try
ah,
to cover the need for movement, but instead was thrilled to be able to be present and to experience. Cat just jumped up here, and to experience where we were and to just know that it was okay to be her was something that I could see that here being seen, heard, and known matters so much. It doesn't matter what age we're at. So everything we do with adults can be done with kids. Maybe it needs to be done slightly differently and different verbiage choices, but teaching our youth how to be accepting of who they are without judgment is so beautiful, right? So I love to be able to work with kids.
But isn't it just the important factor in all of our lives is everybody just wants to be accepted for who they are, you know,
Absolutely.
and that's really what it is. It's just being, and I see it with others because I've worked with a lot of people with their own with other handicaps, and if we can just accept people for who they are, for what they are, maybe we wouldn't have even what's going on in the world today. Of doesn't matter what religion you are, it doesn't. None
Right.
of this matters. If we could just be respectful and love one another and help one another, so it doesn't matter if you're at a part where you need a little bit of help, whether it's being able to move something, whether it's being able to, whatever the case may
Mm-hmm.
be. And if we could just learn to all be more accepted and of others for who they actually are, would be a lot kinder of a world, and maybe we wouldn't have all of this going on today.
absolutely. And Glenda, it's so interesting. I keep thinking about you experienced with your siblings, what, 30 years or so ago?
Oh, more than
More
that.
than that. Okay. And
I was
then,
I was a child when my brothers were when I was born. I was the youngest of four, and so we're talking about my eldest brother is 70 years old.
oh,
So
okay.
60 odd years ago, um,
Right.
I started watching. The world was very different 50, 60
Right.
years ago, And, most people, when you had, my mother was looked at as weird, or my parents, because, most people, when they had a child with who had special needs, put them into institutions and you never
Right.
saw them again. And that was the norm. And it wasn't many years ago that in Toronto, there were these institutions that were not that far away. And they just, in the last 15, 20 years, that they closed them down because they were just, it's kind of remind me a little bit of the concentration camps.
Yep.
People were
Oh,
put
sure.
in, they were not looked after. They were experimented on, and all sorts of horrible things went on.
Yeah, and that long ago for you, my experience because of my daughter being an advocate was maybe 12, 15 years ago. And Deborah, so it's still happening. So where does the responsibility lie within our community? Is it the parents that should talk about it? Should school talk about it? Where do we start to
Both.
bring disabilities into inclusion?
I think it
It's
needs to be both.
Yeah, it has to start from the ground up, because what I've looked at, my children don't know any different because they grew up with their uncles being who they are. So
Right.
my children saw it firsthand, and they have a very different outlook in life because of that. But the schools have to start, years ago when you had somebody with, wheelchairs, they weren't, I know it all through the world that we're much, we're pretty well wheelchair accessible in I would say 90% of things. I don't know. You tell me, Deborah. You're the one
Um,
out there.
Yeah.
Wheelchair accessible, I'd say not nearly 90%. I'd
Okay,
say a
so
lot
in
less.
Canada, we pretty well are now. Everything has been for that. It's
Although,
actually so, yeah.
and I say too, you don't truly know until you put the blindfold on or you
Sure.
sit in the chair. I remember being on a tour in Alaska, and the person who was running the tour thought that it was the most accessible thing on the planet, and she was so thrilled and gushing about how accessible it was. And then we got off the bus. I wheeled up to a store. I was trying to go into a photography store. So as mentioned, I have been a photographer since 13, and I was trying to get into the store. Well, first off, it had like this huge, sharp curb cut thing to get in, and then there was no way to pull the door open and try to go in at the same time.
Yeah.
So I had to wait for somebody to come by to open the door for me. And then I noticed all the shops on the street, and this was their main street, were like that. So sometimes we think things are accessible until we're really experiencing it. I remember until I saw my friend who was paralyzed from the rib cage down,
Yeah.
high paralysis, and noticed how long it took her to transfer from her wheelchair to the toilet seat. Until I saw that, because I can get out of my chair. I lean on my service dog. He stands next to me, and I transition to. And he stands next to me, waiting for me to fall. It's kind of funny. It's hilarious. But as I'm transitioning, it's like, dude, do you know something I don't know? And he probably does. But when I saw her spend over an hour to transfer to the toilet, it was kind of remembering an eye opening, right? Of not really how accessible things are, or airplanes. Just these things that we take for granted. Or recently, a person that I know from Clubhouse, he was doing a race in LA, and he was in a hand cycle. They didn't have any handicapped powder putties in LA in a race that had people that were disabled.
Oh,
So sometimes we think things are accessible, but we don't necessarily notice it. When I started college in '93, the president of the university had asked me to give him a list of 10 things I wanted changed. Well, one of them, this was SUNY Albany, and one of them, all the doors had the double door, the electric door on the outside, but not on the inside. So you can get out of the snow, but you're going to get into the building. I mean, that really wasn't very, wasn't so
really?
helpful. But they had no braille signs. There were no signs at the university that would help somebody who was visually impaired to get around. It wasn't something somebody thought about. Or getting to the second level, you could only go through the main building if it was open where the elevator was. There was no ramp to get down to the second level where all of the after school meetings were usually held. So these were things that people hadn't thought of until somebody, in that case it was me, wheeling around and putting on the hat of different conditions that might need accommodations. I do a lot with adaptive playgrounds, right? So we're working with these spinning discs, these different, I don't know what you call them, but equipment that I literally wheeled on and was able to be on with able-bodied kids running around and making the merry-go-round things go around, or the seesaws, or a slide where it had a place I could wheel up to, transition, go down the slide, which I did go down in a Crown and Sash for an opening of one last spring, and it has a dignity landing so that you can slide over. But those parks are really far and few and in between,
Yeah.
or programs at those parks for nonverbal kids to communicate. Or, they have like a thing, instead of playing the sounds like a chimes, you can wheel over different spaces. Or if you're a kid jumping, you can jump to the different spaces. So it became something you can do in a chair and you can move your body in, or you can stand on, right? So again, that engagement, we don't have enough of those. We don't have enough of those understandings to really fully be that inclusive. And to say, DC, I've been there a couple of times and it hasn't become that
Yeah.
much more accessible in the
Yeah,
past
no,
30
I
years.
hear what you're saying, and I understand. And yeah, you're right. We're moving, but
We are.
we still got a long ways to go. And unfortunately, it's with all the other challenges that are happening now. With you know, everything costs a lot of money, and I guess that's
It
part
does.
of the biggest challenges, especially doing all
Absolutely.
of these things. The costs of
But it is
socio,
changing.
and
We're
that's
seeing us more in ads. Apple just had an ad on the on the news that had a big inclusion of people with disabilities. You're seeing more inclusion in clothing that we
yes,
haven't seen before. I was so excited. Not that I was buying a Tommy Hilfiger shirt, but they had ones that were designed for infusions. And I did do a video on Facebook showing a shirt specifically designed for people that have ports, because like I have a port.
Oh, wow.
I'm actually doing IV fluids, right now, and this shirt is designed so that you can easily access your. Well, not, I usually access myself, but this way, your nurse can access you or do the IV treatments. There's a change coming, and I just came from the Abilities Expo, and I wanted to share this change because it was so beautiful. If you don't mind, because I never been here before,
Oh,
but
please.
please do.
Yeah.
it was. I grew up without seeing people ahead of me that were major role models in the disability arena. I didn't know about Judy and all these other these camps and these programs at that time. But I ran into more than half a dozen young women that probably late teens, early 20s, full of self love, full of self confidence, that are wheelchair bound, or that are like me, who can be standing and sitting in crutches and wheelchairs and all the adaptive tools on the planet, and they're thriving. They're beautiful young women who loving who they're at, who they are, where they're at, starting their own programs and companies. Many of them are all influencers, like large influencers. I mean, 200,000 plus followers, and I think not even at 2,000, right? And
Okay.
I'm looking at it, and I'm going, wow. But to see where they're at today, because the people that have been learning how to become accepted in a society that didn't used to accept us and still doesn't quite know what to do with us or what category to put us in,
Yeah.
even though 1 in 4 people have some sort of a disability, and everybody's going to have some sort of a challenge in some way, shape, or form, and it does not discriminate in any way, shape, or form.
Now,
So it crosses all lines, but we don't know what to do when we're there. And until we talk about it and learn how to be okay with talking about something that makes you uncomfortable, we're not going to be fully integrated. But there's hope. And this is what I say through my advocacy work. I see hope on the horizon. I've been a speaker at organizations from parenting with rare diseases to pharmaceutical companies, talking about the patient experience, right? And that inclusion of patients in the research and in the advocacy work, and to understand where we're at in life. So there's so much hope on the horizon, and there's so much more discussion of inclusion in the adaptive sports. And for those that don't know, adaptive sports can be true godsend to anybody, but especially those with chronic illnesses. And yes, it could be expensive. So It's not a requirement, but it does change our mindset and our outlook in life. And seeing this growth, it's just, it's mind blowing and phenomenal. I even learned
Beautiful.
about visual player hockey. I mean,
Yeah.
just to know there's no bounds. Cognitive, mental, development challenges, whether it's mental health challenges or whether it's physical, there's something we can all do, and we can all thrive in some way. Just
And we can
finding
all
that.
talk about it. And
Yes.
without, like you, just as I said at the beginning, asking you about what your what your situation was. There's nothing wrong with asking questions, and that's what I want people to really realize. And there's nothing wrong with saying to somebody, and I see it all the time, of can I help you? And it's not that you're saying that anybody is weaker or anything like that. But you know what? A helping hand is always worthwhile and always very appreciative. So it's the kindest way to
Asking.
move forward.
The ask is so valuable. I'm still learning how to ask for help, and I've been practicing accepting help.
Yeah,
So,
I get that one.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a strange world out there right now, Deborah. So I can imagine, one of the things I learned though from dealing and working with handicap is you just want to be treated like everyone else. I would see people like talk really, really loud. And my daughter would say they don't have they can hear you, they can hear you. And it was really interesting because my daughter was not very good in math, but her best buddy was a boy with Down syndrome. He was brilliant in math, and he used to tutor her. So you can, they're just like us. They want to be like us, accepted like us. They are us. So I love, love, love hearing your take on all of this, Deborah.
thank you.
I,
And I really appreciate that opportunity to speak about it. And just want to highlight something you said, both of you, is asking for help, communicating, being open to communication. And I think this is where that, again, we come back to that energy of making sure when you're asking somebody, you're saying in a way that lets us know that you actually are asking, right? Because we all know that concept of people automatically say, "Hey, how are you today?" but not necessarily
they don't
really
listen.
wanting to, right?
I know. I've tried that. I've had actually things where I've said, "No, I'm not doing really well," and they'll go, "Oh, okay, great."
Right.
Okay, see ya.
Yeah. So I get all this. Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we are coming to the end of our hour. And Deborah, we could, and I'd love for another time for you to come on and join in again, because you've got so much information, and it's very important information that I want people to know that, having, disabilities is not a disability.
Right.
Everybody's got abilities. We just have to learn how to use what we got. And I think that's
Yep.
really key in all of our lives. So Deborah, with everything that you do, how can people catch you and connect up and get some extra help or whatever, some type of learnings of some sort?
A couple of different places. So I'll give a shout out to our OWL app. I know we're on the OWL app, so I can be found on the OWL app for one-on-ones in that way. I also have my 10K card and can be contacted directly through there or our website for Victorious, VICKTORIOUS.org. I'm available for one-on-ones as well as group programs, working with everybody from youth to the business space, really talking about how do we create adaptive and inclusive spaces, whether it's in the home, classroom, or in the office space. It's all about helping us meet people where they're at, creating that community, being open for those connections and those collaborations, because together we're unstoppable.
Absolutely. I love that. Beautiful. And Nicole, what little wisdom would you like to shed on us before we leave today?
The word that keeps coming to mind is acceptance. And I think acceptance is so important, regardless of handicaps or not, because we're all different, we're all unique, and we all have our own special ways about us. And don't be afraid to talk about it, to ask about it. I asked Deborah certain questions about it. She's very forthcoming. People just want to be accepted for who they are. And we all have feelings. As a parent, I would have had a daughter with Down syndrome, and I would want her to be included in everything. I would have wanted acceptance for her. Very proud of my older daughter who took it upon herself to bring acceptance to her group of people that she stood up for mightily and very loudly, I might add, because all of us are humans and we all want the same thing, to be accepted and loved.
I love it. Well, Deborah, it was an absolute honor to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you can come again and we talk a little bit further, because this is one of the subjects that we need to be talking about more all around the world, and loving and accepting one another.
Thank you so much. So thank you for having me on here today.
Totally our pleasure. And so if you have any questions, we will put some of Deborah's contact information below the video so that you can reach out to her. And remember, just touch somebody's life, because we all just need to be heard, felt, and just recognized more than anything else. To everybody, have a wonderful day.